Hello again. The government have grown pretty tired of people constantly talking about the £5 million or so which it costs to keep asylum seekers in hotels, and so they've decided to do something about it. Of course, the solution that many of us would advocate would be not to allow illegal immigrants to cross the channel in their tens of thousands each year, but that's not how our leaders are going to solve the problem. Instead, they've started leasing all sorts of large buildings in different parts of the country and filling them up with asylum seekers, almost all of whom are young men. It doesn't matter that these buildings may be wholly unsuited to the purpose, but anything at all rather than have them in the hotels where Daily Mail reporters can start asking awkward questions about the cost. All this is being done without any consultation with local authorities, let alone local people. A former factory is acquired, and then the Albanians are bussed in. Those living nearby who object are dismissed as racist malcontents. A typical example of this process, which the national newspapers and television don't seem to know about that much, was the leasing by the Home Office of a former mill which was standing empty in Yorkshire. It is in Milnsbridge, which was once a village and is now on the edge of Huddersfield. The only claim to fame for the place is that it's where former Prime Minister Harold Wilson was born and brought up. Milnsbridge is a quiet place, almost entirely working class and still a little like a village in some ways, although now part of a larger district. Of course, nobody bothered to inform the local residents that the local mill there had been seized by the Home Office and that more than 80 single young men were going to be moved in there. What would these men do all day? How would they occupy themselves? What facilities were there in the mill for them? The Home Office hadn't bothered to consider any of this because it was enough to get these men away from South East England, where most refugees and asylum seekers tended to congregate. Above all, they wanted to reduce the appalling amount of money being spent on hotels, because it keeps being mentioned in the newspapers. Would there be jobs in Milnsbridge for 86 young foreign men? Houses and flats for them to live in? Of course not, but none of that matters. The men have already begun moving into the old mill, and in the description to this video I give a link to a news item about this. It is of course only one example, there are many others. The government is determined not to have any more tabloid stories about the cost of hotels, and so is foisting these people off on villages and towns across the whole country. Since most of the asylum seekers are single young men, this is already causing problems in some areas. Hand in hand with this is what is known as the National Transfer Scheme, which most viewers will not have heard of. In addition to the usual scams, such as burning passports and pretending to come from different countries, there is the unaccompanied child trick, in which a man of 20 or even older will claim to be 14 or 15. These are always men, by the way. If they are accepted as being children unaccompanied by their parents, then the chances of being refused asylum in this country are zero. Very few genuinely unaccompanied children arrive on small boats. Because most of these children are being cared for in Kent and Croydon, where the Home Office has special facilities, the government has now decided that every local authority in the country should be obliged to take such unaccompanied children and look after them. I'll give a link to details about this scheme in the description to this video. Many councils are reluctant to take such people, which is why the government had to put the bite on them and use legal pressure. Having a 21-year-old man placed in a class of 15-year-old boys and girls can create, well, shall we say, difficulties. I've seen this myself at a further education college I worked at. That's Epping Forest College, which is just down the road from me. There was a young man on one course who was an Afghan asylum seeker whose nominal age was 18. The other students, though, were well aware that he actually had a wife and children in Afghanistan, And he slipped up a few times when asked for his date of birth. I think he was really 24. It was a terrible situation because the college also allowed 14 to 16-year-old pupils in who couldn't cope with full-time school for any reason. They let them come and attend courses in English and maths at the college. I saw the Afghan guy sitting in the canteen and making efforts to befriend a 14-year-old girl. This was a bit much and I took action. This is the sort of situation which this particular scam leads to sometimes.